Welcome everyone to another episode of Retro Wrestling Reviews. Fredo Esparza here, and this week we look back at Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling's December 19th, 1981 show. Before we get to the review, be sure to click the subscribe button. We'll have more wrestling show reviews as well as the Lucha World podcast and other content available. This episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling was taped on December 9th, 1981 at the WPCQ TV studios in Charlotte, North Carolina. Bob Caudle and David Crockett are on commentary. David Crockett mentions that the Ninja has a new manager, and that is Gene Anderson. That is then followed by Sergeant Slaughter showing up to remind everyone that he has the $1,000 Cobra Clutch Challenge still open. Bob Caudle asks him about Jay Youngblood challenging Slaughter, and he says Youngblood already had his chance, and he's giving others an opportunity. The first match on the show is Blackjack Mulligan Jr., better known as Barry Windham now, and Jake the Snake Roberts beating Charlie Fulton and Chris Markoff, with Mulligan Jr. pinning Fulton after a bulldog. Some quick tags by Mulligan Jr. and Roberts throughout the match. Thought this was an okay match. Roberts and Mulligan Jr. controlled most of the match and kept it moving at a fast pace. Closing minutes saw Roberts backdrop Fulton and catch him with a knee lift, which seemed to be one of the big moves in pro wrestling during the early 1980s, with Mr. Wrestling 2 and Jake Roberts using it quite a bit. Actually, Roberts during that time was using that as a finisher despite already using the DDT as well. He would usually get somebody with the DDT and then follow it up with a knee lift for the win. That then leads to Mulligan Jr. getting the pin on Fulton after a bulldog. Roberts kept Markoff from making the save. The next match is the Ninja with Gene Anderson beating Mike Davis after a middle rope headbutt for the pin. The Ninja spits out some green mist before the bell rings. He controlled most of the match, with Davis making a brief comeback that didn't last very long. The Ninja mostly used hard chops at Davis to wear him down and eventually got a big kick followed by a headbutt for the win. That is then followed by the third match on the show, which is Terry Taylor beating Mike Miller with a leg lock submission hold. Announcers mentioned Terry Taylor is the NWA Rookie of the Year and is currently undefeated. Blackjack Mulligan Jr. joins commentary and talks about Sergeant Slaughter's $1,000 Cobra Clutch Challenge. He also praises Terry Taylor and says he has world champion potential. This was a good back and forth by Taylor and Miller, but again, this is another short match. Taylor lands a forearm at Miller and then puts him in a leg lock to get the win. Sergeant Slaughter and Private Jim Nelson come out for a promo for upcoming Mid-Atlantic shows. Sergeant Slaughter says hello to President Gerald Ford. He says Jerry is a big Wolverines fan. He has Nelson tell everyone who the best wrestler is in the world, and Nelson, of course, says it's Sergeant Slaughter. He mentions they do 15-minute road work with Nelson running and Slaughter driving his truck. The next match on the show was Handsome Jimmy Valiant beating Tony Russo with an elbow drop for the pin. This again was another short match. Music kept playing as Valiant started the match. Jimmy's very bouncy in the ring as usual. Valiant, of course, dominated this very short match once again. Like I said, I think that was one of the weird things, is that because of the copyrighted music, WWE Network, they have to change the music to something that's something in-house, and it's actually doesn't sound that, I would assume it doesn't sound that much different from what was actually playing live or on that original telecast. Up next, we have Ricky Steamboat and Paul Jones joining Bob Caudle for interviews. They talk about Ole Anderson and how Ray Stevens figured out what Ole's intentions were. They replay Ray Stevens coming out to the ring to help Steamboat against Roddy Piper and Ole Anderson. Jake Roberts then joins them for the interview. Paul Jones says he doesn't trust Stevens. Steamboat thinks Stevens is after Ole and they are not quite friends. Roberts says Ole Anderson is making a lot of enemies right now. Big John Studd then joins Bob Caudle for an interview. Fans start a "We Want Blackjack" chant at Studd. Studd says he's wanted Blackjack for a long time, and it took him slapping his kid to get his attention. He says Mulligan embarrassed and laughed at him in the past. He wants to end Mulligan and end this feud. He insults all the rednecks in the area and says they only have one thing to cheer for, and that's Blackjack Mulligan, and once he ends him, they won't have anything in their lives. Roddy Piper then joins Bob Caudle, and he's smiling at what Studd just said about Mulligan. He says he enjoys Nothing better than truth. He is upset that Ricky Steamboat cried in order to get a title match. He says he is the Mid-Atlantic champion and he can do whatever he wants. The next match was Billy Robinson beating Don Kernoodle with a backbreaker for the pin. This was the best match on the show. This had a good back and forth between both Robinson and Kernoodle. Robinson showcased his submission holds in the match. They did a sequence where Kernoodle kept trying to get Robinson in a Boston Crab, and when he finally did, Robinson flipped Kernoodle over, which I thought was a really cool spot. Kernoodle late in the match caught Robinson with an atomic drop and followed with a tackle off the ropes and then a slam. Don looked like he had the upper hand on Billy, but Robinson gets back up and caught Kernoodle with a high, brutal looking backbreaker to get the win. This was a good TV match. Sergeant Slaughter returns and joins Bob Caudle on this, going to give a demonstration. He says he has a young punk, who happens to be Tony Anthony, who would later become the Dirty White Boy, in the ring to demonstrate the Cobra Clutch Challenge. Slaughter asks Caudle to join him in the ring, but Caudle isn't sure if the microphone wire will let him get inside the ring. Sergeant Slaughter thanks Anthony for being part of the demonstration and has him sit in a chair in the ring. Private Jim Nelson is in the ring as well. Caudle is able to get in the ring. He asks why Nelson is in the ring, and Slaughter tells him that he's there to watch the demonstration as well. Sergeant Slaughter explains how to apply the Cobra Clutch. He also tells everyone the effects of the hold. He mentions that his opponents can submit by tapping on his arm, but if they don't tap, then they go to sleep. He applies the hold on Tony Anthony, who immediately taps Slaughter's arm to give up. Slaughter starts to apologize for not breaking the hold and then kicks the chair out from under Anthony and puts the Cobra Clutch on him. Referee tries to get Slaughter to break the hold, but he refuses. Nelson then shoves the referee out of the way. Jay Youngblood, Terry Taylor, Blackjack Mulligan Jr., and Jake Roberts run out to make the save for Tony Anthony. That is then followed by promos of Jay Youngblood, Porkchop Cash, and Jake Roberts for upcoming Mid-Atlantic TV shows that will be airing in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The final match on the show is Pretty Boy Carl Fergie and Ox Baker beating Jay Youngblood and Keith Larson. After Baker hit Larson with the heart punch and Fergie covered him for the pin. This was again another short match. They kept Larson in for most of the match with Baker and Fergie getting some quick tags and beating on him. Youngblood tried to help but never got in the match. Baker ends up hitting Larson with the heart punch. Fergie pinned Larson. To close out the show, we have Paul Jones and Jake Roberts come out for an interview. Jones says what Slaughter did was uncalled for. Jay Youngblood and Blackjack Mulligan Jr. join Bob Caudle as well, along with Jake the Snake Roberts. Youngblood says that Sergeant Slaughter owes him another shot at the $1,000 challenge. Roberts and Mulligan Jr. talk about being a tag team and having seen Baker and Fergie, the current Mid-Atlantic Tag Team Champions, for the first time and coming away impressed. This show comes to an end. I thought this was a fun show. Most of the matches were kept short, with the opening tag match and the Robinson versus Kernoodle match going a bit longer and being the best matches on the show. Sergeant Slaughter again was great on here as he continues to be a total heel and using his Cobra Clutch challenge as a way to hurt people. And this week it was Tony Anthony's turn. It was kind of amazing to watch the guys making the save after that incident, because in the ring at that point you had Slaughter, Tony Anthony, who again I mentioned would later become their Dirty White Boy, Blackjack Mulligan Jr., who is better known as Barry Windham now, Jay Youngblood, Jake Roberts, and Terry Taylor. That is quite the group of talent in that segment. I also liked how Fergie and Baker worked as a team, with Baker limiting what he did in the ring to mostly just doing the heart punch and letting Fergie work the bulk of the match. That match was short too, so that was likely an even better decision. That's it for this review. Be sure to subscribe to the Retro Wrestling YouTube channel, and we'll be back again soon with more reviews.